For the first time since the Industrial Revolution, global power is drifting away from the West, quietly, steadily, and with mathematical precision. A shift not triggered by war, but by economics, demographics, and long-term planning. China has spent the last 40 years engineering the world's most strategic economic transformation, turning villages into megacities and factories into global monopolies. Sexy edge of a new supercycle, a multi-decade rise that could rewrite the foundations of global power. Neutrality, once confident in their superiority, now face a rival that moves slowly but strikes permanently. Wilmington of the rest of the world is beginning to understand. Lowy is not just another economic competitor. This is a civilization preparing to reclaim dominance on its own terms. The question is no longer if the shift is happening, but whether anyone can stop it. Unlike Western economies driven by elections, fluctuating policies, and short-term incentives, China functions on a timeline measured in decades. Its economic blueprint is not chaotic, it is engineered. Clang, every port, every factory, every technological sector is part of a long-term national strategy. The Belt and Road Initiative is not just infrastructure, it's a global influence network stretching across continents. Debt diplomacy, trade routes, and strategic partnerships bind dozens of countries into China's economic orbit. From Africa to the Middle East to Southeast Asia, China is building roads, power plants, and digital networks that nations can no longer imagine living without. Foreground. Ceased competition. China sees inevitability. A silent empire built not with armies, but with contracts, ports, and supply chains. China doesn't just participate in global supply chains, it controls them. From rare earth metals to pharmaceuticals, from steel to electronics, the world runs through Chinese factories. Even when products aren't made in China, their components, machinery, or materials often are. This wasn't an accident, it was a blueprint. China positioned itself as the irreplaceable engine of manufacturing, ensuring every nation depends on its output. And in moments of crisis, pandemic shutdowns, trade wars, inflationary shocks, the world realized how deeply entangled it had become. Supply chains that once seemed unbreakable revealed a hidden truth. China isn't just a participant in global production, it is the foundation holding the system together. Whoever controls production controls power. Foreground. And China has already secured its throne. While the world debated social media, China quietly built a digital empire. 5G networks, surveillance systems, payment platforms, tools the West barely understood, became instruments of control, efficiency, and expansion. Companies like Huawei and TikTok are not just businesses, they are strategic assets extending China's digital influence into billions of pockets and screens. At home, digital monitoring forms a social credit system, rewriting human behavior. Abroad, China exports affordable surveillance technology to governments seeking control. This digital dominance is more powerful than any military fleet, because it shapes information, behavior, and truth itself. China isn't just building infrastructure, it's building the future operating system of the world. For centuries, global power was defined by currency. Priesthood shaped the 1800s, the US dollar dominated the 1900s. But the 2000s may tell a new story. China is methodically internationalizing the yuan through trade deals, digital currency trials, and energy partnerships with Saudi Arabia and Russia. The launch of the digital yuan could become the world's first state-backed programmable currency, bypassing SWIFT, banks, and the Western financial system. The petrodollar is no longer untouchable. If oil begins trading in yuan, even partially, the global financial order shifts. A new monetary empire is rising, one transaction at a time. The ancient Silk Road once connected China to the world through trade. Gravitational version redefines economics entirely. The Belt and Road Initiative has built ports in Pakistan, railways in Europe, highways in Africa, and strategic bases across the Indian Ocean. Not in construction, but in dependency. Nations financing these projects owe billions to China, creating leverage far more powerful than military conquest. This network is not a map of infrastructure. It is a map of influence. A shadow empire spreading across continents, built with concrete instead of cannons. The world may not see the borders, but China knows exactly where they are. While focusing on economic dominance, China quietly transformed its military into one of the world's most advanced forces. Hypersonic missiles, anti-ship weapons, cyber warfare units, and drone swarms have replaced outdated strategies. The South China Sea has become a geopolitical chessboard, and China is placing its pieces with precision. Artificial islands, bases, and naval expansion signal more than regional control. They signal intent. A nation preparing not just for economic dominance, but for geopolitical rewriting. A superpower does not rise quietly forever. At some point, it steps onto the global stage, unmistakably. Even empires have vulnerabilities. China faces a demographic crisis, a shrinking population, aging workforce, and declining birth rates. Factories that once relied on endless labor now face shortages. The one-child policy created unintended consequences that echo through generations. Can a nation rise when its workforce declines? China believes technology can fill the void. Automation, robotics, AI-driven factories replacing human labor. Combating population may slow growth, but it may also accelerate innovation. The demographic cliff is real, but China is determined to turn weakness into strategy. The West views China's rise not as competition, but as a threat to its economic identity. Tariffs, sanctions, alliances, and containment strategies reveal a deeper panic. For the first time, the West is not setting the rules. It is reacting to them. Invoked. China's rise represents a world where Western dominance is no longer guaranteed, where the economic center of gravity shifts eastward. Windshield is not just geopolitical, it's psychological. A realization that history may be cycling back, restoring balance after centuries of Western supremacy. The West debates, neutrality builds, and the gap widens. Every empire rises through cycles: accumulation, expansion, consolidation. Plunge China now enters its most powerful cycle yet. Economists call it the China supercycle, a long-term phase where China becomes the engine of global growth, innovation, and influence. Its markets shape global demand. Plunge its currency reshapes trade. Its technology rewrites the digital world. It's a slow, tectonic shift, forging an empire forming not through battles, but through production, logistics, and digital control. The world is not witnessing China rise. It is witnessing the world rearrange around it. The world once believed globalization was permanent, that supply chains would connect nations forever. But rising tensions have triggered a new era, the Great Decoupling. The US and Europe are attempting to pull production away from China, returning factories to domestic soil or shifting them to Southeast Asia and India. But China is not reacting with fear. It is adapting. Chinese companies are quietly expanding into Mexico, Vietnam, and Africa, ensuring they remain central to production even if Made in China labels disappear. Decoupling doesn't weaken China. It spreads its influence beyond its borders. An empire distributed across continents cannot be contained. Improperly is no longer just a country. It is a global manufacturing organism. Unpredict out to escape its orbit simply pulls the world deeper into it. This is not the end of globalization. It is the beginning of China's version of it. While Western nations debate Africa's potential, China is already rewriting the continent's economic future. Ports, highways, fiber optic cables, power grids. China is constructing the skeleton of a new African industrial age. Millions of Chinese workers and entrepreneurs have moved across the continent, building shops, factories, and entire industrial zones. Loans flow easily, but so does influence. African minerals feed Chinese factories. African markets buy Chinese products. This partnership is not temporary, it is generational. A blueprint for a future where Africa becomes China's most strategic ally and largest source of growth. Blockchain sees humanitarian aid. Defiance sees opportunity. And by the time others notice, the infrastructure of the next century will already carry Beijing's fingerprints. This is not exploitation. It is empire through investment. Subtle, profitable, unstoppable. For decades, China was mocked as a copycat nation, a country that copied Western ideas instead of creating its own. Crimson, that era is over. China now produces more engineers annually than the entire Western world combined. It leads in AI patents, quantum research, electric vehicles, and biotechnology. Companies like BYD, DJI, and TikTok have already surpassed Western competitors in scale and innovation. Shenzhen has become the Silicon Valley of hardware. Subtract Beijing and Shanghai are rising as the capitals of artificial intelligence. Innovation is no longer a Western monopoly. It is a battlefield. And China is winning, not by chance, but by investing trillions into the technologies that will define the next century. The world expected China to follow. It is leading instead. Economic power alone does not define an empire. Culture does. China's influence is now spreading through cinema, streaming platforms, mobile apps, and diaspora communities worldwide. Mandarin language programs have expanded across universities. Chinese historical dramas dominate Asian screens. And as millions travel, study, and work abroad, they carry pieces of the culture with them. Not anything soft. This cultural rise is not entirely soft, nationalism and identity. What happens when a rising power exports not just products, but values? The world is watching China's cultural expansion with fascination and uncertainty. Because whoever shapes culture shapes perception, and perception shapes reality. The ideological contest of the 21st century has only just begun. Every empire has a moment of confrontation, a test that reveals its true intentions. For China, that moment is Taiwan. A thriving democracy, a global chip manufacturing powerhouse, and the symbolic final piece of China's territorial puzzle. Beijing vows reunification. Washington vows protection. The world fears a miscalculation. Taiwan's semiconductor factories power the entire global economy, and any conflict would trigger an economic collapse unlike anything seen in modern history. This is not just a political dispute. It is the most dangerous economic bottleneck on Earth. China believes history favors its claim. The West believes democracy must be defended. And in the silence between these positions lies the risk of the next great global conflict. The supercycle is powerful, but one misstep could change everything. The world that once revolved around the West now rotates differently. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably toward the East. Trade routes are shifting. Psychologists are redrawing. Currencies are competing. Gravitational center pulling everything into its orbit. Prosecute. But this is not a story of domination. It is a story of rebalancing, a correction after centuries of Western-led globalization. China's rise does not mean the West will fall, but it means the world will no longer belong to a single power. Instead, it enters a new era of multipolarity, complex, competitive, interdependent. Blackmail where stability depends not on supremacy, but on cooperation. The supercycle is not merely economic, it is civilizational. As the world watches, China continues building, silently, relentlessly, methodically. Megacities rising in months, not years. Electric grids stretching across borders. digital currencies preparing to rewrite finance, a population moving from poverty to middle class at a speed no historian ever imagined. This is the foundation of a long-term empire, one built not on conquest, but on construction. The future will not be determined by ideology or military power or even technology alone. It will be determined by whoever builds the systems the world depends on. And right now, China is building more than anyone. The super cycle has begun. The world may resist, adapt, or compete, but it cannot ignore what comes next.